Hello and welcome to another Out of Spec Reviews video, and actually welcome to just a upcoming start to a series that I'm so excited to share with you. I just landed back in America from China and then the UAE. I spent 2 weeks on the road exploring electric cars in other markets. Now, that's not really anything new for this channel. Of course, we're based in America, but we do travel to Europe quite often and other places to explore EVs. However, this was the big trip that I've been wanting to make for years. And I think the timing was perfect and our experiences were absolutely insane and eye-opening. I was able to spend 10 days testing new and interesting electric cars in China. We looked at charging infrastructure, new vehicles, vehicle factory tours, charging performances, a bunch of stuff. I think in total we shot 15 to 25 different individual episodes for you. I have to compile all the footage and get it together in the upcoming weeks for you guys to see. But what I want to do is really encapsulate the whole trip so you know what videos are coming, you know the timeline of how it all played out, my impressions on the trip, and just the overall feeling of what it was like as a car enthusiast spending time in China. So it starts now, our Out of Spec China series. Well, if you're watching this video at some time in the future, it is very early 2025. I went in January 2025 to mostly the Shanghai area, but we also did a couple road trips up to Beijing, out to Hefei, some other places, which was amazing. And I think in general, from the American perspective, is how I've treated the trip. And we went over to China. Well, I guess let me talk about the car market in general. So the car market in general is completely worlds different between US, Europe, let's just say the Western world, and China. I mean, it is absolutely an insane, stark difference as to what people are buying, what they're interested in, vehicle pricing, vehicle features, vehicle capabilities. And that's what I wanted to go film. I'm not here to say everything is better over in China, because it certainly isn't. But I'm certainly here to show there's some really cool stuff that makes interesting videos for you guys. And we've learned a lot about things. So just as a highlight, I've charged an EV faster than I've ever charged an electric car. I've seen electric vans that are just the craziest, coolest vehicles on the planet. And the biggest takeaway for me is even the crappiest shitbox new cars that are sold in China are like fully vertically integrated software, like with, Tesla equivalent, response time on the screen and fantastic driver assistance systems. Really, in the US, Tesla FSD at the time of this recording is the only driver assistance system that is just clearly designed to operate in the future and can do so much today on and off the highway. In China, that's like normal, and there's multiple competing systems that can do like what FSD does. So what I want to do is actually go through my X feed, my Twitter feed, because that's where I kind of document everything. I know not everyone uses X, so I do post on Instagram, Threads, and some others as well, but X is just the easiest thing for me to get on, boom, go, and a lot of our viewers are there, which is why I post there. So let me walk you through the trip, and it all starts day one, landing in Shanghai. So let me queue up the screen here. We should be good to go, and yes, so we landed and at the Shanghai airport. We landed in Shanghai Pudong Airport, which I guess is like the eastern side airport. There's two major airports in Shanghai. Humongous city. It takes like almost 2 hours in the middle of the day to go from one side to the other. It's absolutely wild. And our good friends Drew and Alice arranged a Li Auto Mega to pick us up from the airport. Now, the plan was to shoot a full review of the Li Mega and show its charging performance and do all this stuff. But that's the one regret from the trip that I have. And really, I think we got everything else in. We never shot a full video with the Li Mega. So I think this is a good opportunity to tell you a little bit about this particular vehicle. So it's a electric van, in a sense. It's built by Li Auto, and it's, I believe, their first battery electric model. Li is incredibly popular in China. Driving around, you'll see L6, 7, 8, and 9. The L9 is sick. It's like a Mercedes GLS, but like this range extended EV thing. And that's really why they've gotten so popular. And E-revs are incredibly common in China, where you'll have a small turbocharged combustion 3 or 4 cylinder engine powering purely a generator that feeds the high voltage battery pack. So you can drive it like an EV, but then when you go out into the distance, go out on the road trip, you have your combustion engine to work with you. And actually, in case you didn't know, China is a huge country. And so having an extended range EV option does actually make some sense, especially as home charging can be challenging for some, and also road trip challenging during, we were there just before Chinese New Year. So charging stations were starting to get a little bit busier, and we never had to wait in line, but we did like drive past some full charging stations. And, having just a small combustion engine as a little backup power source is a really cool idea. We didn't test any of those this trip. We just focused on battery electric vehicles, but I will be back, and I do think it's something we should keep our eye on because it's an interesting sort of stopgap. I much prefer that technology than to a plug-in hybrid technology. So Drew and Alice picked us up in the Li Mega, and it's such a awesome looking van. I mean, personally, I think it's like this really cool, almost dustbuster shape. There's Drew and Alice there. And this was our first experience getting into China. Let me turn off the audio there. But we're just cruising along, with these 2 mega screens, with this fantastic driver assistance, with fantastic suspension control. And I'm like, whoa, this is really nice. And it actually turned out that the Li Mega was one of our favorite cars from the entire trip that we tested and played around with. We did end up taking it to a charging station and some other things, and perhaps I'll do a whole podcast episode about the Li Mega, but I was really impressed with that particular vehicle. In China, the response is not as strong as we had. I don't know if it's new to us and it's cool, but a lot of people we spoke to in the Chinese market, friends of ours over there, said that the Li Mega isn't selling well, and it's not due to anything of the technical capabilities of the vehicle. It's just because it's ugly. They think it looks like a coffin. I guess there was a big social media thing and everyone's like, oh, it's a coffin on wheels. Not into it. And I guess that's a little bit of the Chinese buyer mindset is it's heavily driven by external perception to what you're driving is the feeling that I get. We then arrived to our hotel and we saw a first generation Nissan Leaf, except this wasn't a Nissan Leaf. This is a Venucia E30. And it's essentially a Nissan Leaf, but it's badged as a different brand, has this huge logo on the charge port. And it was really cool to see one of those early Leafs, if you will, but badged as another car. And honestly, until I saw this car, I didn't even know that the Leaf was sold under a different name in the Chinese market all those years ago. I have to give a huge shout out to Neo in this video because this trip was not sponsored by anyone. We flew ourselves over at our own dime. We covered our hotel everything was paid by out of spec. However, we did need some local help on the ground, like test cars and local knowledge on how to get our driving licenses and stuff like that. And Emma at Neo, who is one of their communications people, was just incredibly helpful and generous to offer us a test car for our entire trip so that we could, keep our bags and drive around and, go from film shoot to film shoot. And for the entire first week, we drove a Neo ES6, which is their most popular model. It's sort of a little bit bigger than a Model Y, maybe that kind of size category, but a small mid-size electric SUV that supports battery swapping and some other things. We actually didn't totally get on with this car. We didn't fall in love with it. The suspension was really the worst part about it. But we drove other Neos that we really absolutely fell in love with air suspension going on road trips, and I'll talk about those. So Neo was really cool to hook us up with the test car, and we'll get into some other things as well. Just going through, they even provided, because they knew we were going to be road tripping and driving, I thought this was so funny, they put a Nomi hat. I guess, Neo has like millions of accessories. They equipped our car with a Route 66 cowboy hat, so the Americans could go on a road trip, which I just thought was so funny to see it there. Continuing on, I just walked around our parking garage a little bit, and I found for the first time that I've ever seen the Volvo EM90. Turns out we actually went into the Volvo EM90 factory later on in this trip, and we got to do a bunch with this vehicle, and it'll end up in some tours. But it was a really cool experience to see this. I just love these electric Luxo vans. We have zero equivalent to this in the American market. Maybe there's no desire for it, but I just think they're so cool to have these VIP luxury shuttles, family haulers, that are just super cushy and not performance oriented in any way, just as a great VIP transport or nice family vehicle. The EM90 is built on the Zeekr 009 chassis. They share almost identical components, but cost way more than the Zeekr 009, and we really can't figure out why. But that will come up in an upcoming video. You will see that. Just in our hotel parking garage, we stayed downtown Shanghai the first few nights. We had an Audi charging hub. We had a State Grid charging hub. State Grid is really built out this pretty incredible network across China of DC fast charging, but I noticed I didn't say high power DC fast charging. They're all like 60 to 120 kilowatts. Most of them are limited to 250 amps on the cables. And that was a long time GBT standard up until a few years ago, where some of the reason Chinese cars have gone high voltage ahead of the rest of the market is because so much of their charging infrastructure is amperage limited. So you really need the high voltage architecture to get meaningful charging speed from 80% of the charging network. And that is changing and flipping. And we're starting to see higher current. GBT now goes up to 800 amps, I believe. So it's, surpassed most of what we have in the US, sort of matching like that V4 supercharger dispenser that can send 900 amps to the Cybertruck, which is crazy. And, just it's an interesting world we're living in with high current versus high voltage. But in China, we're starting to see like Li chargers come out, Xpeng chargers come, NIO has 500 kilowatt charging, all with higher current and high voltage support, of course. But State Grid in general was sort of the, consider like the least reliable network. People will be like, oh, State Grid, kind of crappy. But they've seemed to change their image around. Actually, I charged multiple times throughout the trip at their State Grid network and really had no issues. And I think the most interesting thing is to pay for charging. There's some charging apps, yes, but most of them are like mini apps inside of WeChat or Alipay. Those are the two main applications in China that you use to communicate and pay. Alipay just really for payment, but WeChat is kind of your everything app. You hook your credit card up to it, scan a QR code, boom, you're good to go. And it activates the charging. It actually worked really well. Yes, of course, we ran into a few snags along the way that limited our ability to activate some chargers. Some required local phone numbers and stuff like that. Now we know for next trip, get a local phone with a local number, find an address, hook everything up that way. It's the way to go. Also in our hotel, we just had a line of level 2 charging stations that was really cool to see. And that's fairly common. Every parking garage we went into had level 2 charging. I'd say 80%, even in the rural areas, had low power DC charging. An interesting quirk about our NIOs, they don't have AC chargers on their vehicles. They either support DC charging or battery swapping. In that market in Europe, they have AC charging. I don't know why they don't put it on the Chinese cars, but I think it would be good. I think that's a real miss. But yeah, charging infrastructure in all of the parking garages was just insane. The other insane takeaway, which isn't necessarily car related, but I think you guys will find this interesting, was every single parking garage we went into, with the exception of just a handful, but almost all of them are also doubled as bomb shelters. You go through these huge blast doors and there's storage units for like gas max and food supplies and all these other things. All throughout the country, every single parking garage doubles as, I guess a human shelter, which is pretty wild. They're totally prepared, which is crazy. So, the next morning we woke up and we went, and this was one of the best experiences of my life, actually going to get our Chinese driver's licenses. In technicality, it's a driving permit that's only valid for 3 months or something like this. And it requires us to just bring like a translated version of our American license to a police station. They issue the driving permit, but NIO actually had someone drive us over there, which was super nice. And we sampled some of the snacks on the way they provided. Again, NIO has like a whole accessory line, so they filled up the car, which I thought was so funny, with some snacks for our trips, which we really did eat and enjoy. So thank you, NIO, for that. # not sponsored, but appreciate the food. Then we then we sat down at the driving license office in Shanghai at the police station, and they made me and Drew watch a 30-minute video on how dangerous driving is. It was like stuff that you probably even couldn't put on YouTube because it would get flagged for like violent content of just cars getting destroyed out on the road. I mean, crazy accidents and like people getting run over, and it was nasty and gory, and you're watching this person get, drug under a car, and then they're like, "Oh, are you ready for your license?" I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to drive after this." But I think that's the point. They're really trying to show that driving's a responsibility and you have to be safe. I didn't learn any rules or regulations about the road from this video, just that it must be the most dangerous place on the planet to drive. And in actuality, driving in China was actually really great. But they reluctantly handed me my driving permit, which I think is one of the best photos to encapsulate the trip. The guy's like, "We're really giving this dude a license?" He's like, "What's going on here?" And yes, they handed me my driving permit, which I still have with me, and it's valid for 3 months. So watch out, China. And I ended up driving thousands of miles, probably 2,000, 2,500 miles throughout our 10-day trip, just exploring. And, I love to drive, and any opportunity we did. But we also did sample some of the local public transit high power or high speed trains, which was really cool. That was awesome. Then we went over to the mall because that's what you do in China, apparently. There's just malls everywhere. We found more charging hubs. This was a BMW and Mercedes collaboration on a really nice high-end charging plaza. And I can't remember. Yeah, this one is 600 amp cables, 800 amp boost. So this was a really juicy station that we were at there. And that's what you're starting to see, this new wave of ultra high power charging coming into China. And I believe that's a StarCharge charger. So shout out StarCharge for sponsoring this channel for a long time. These are the Xiaomi SU7 test drive cars. We've already made a video with the Xiaomi SU7 in Los Angeles. I have a full review already on this channel. So we didn't end up driving this car in China because I had already experienced it here in the US. Still remains my favorite Chinese car. Like if I had to choose one, it would be this. I think it actually drives really well. Great software, pretty good design, great materials, just a wonderful car. Then we saw a Neo power hub. Again, Neos don't have AC charging, so they've built out this low power DC charging network all through China. That's like 20, 40, 70 kilowatt chargers to match the dwell time of what you're doing. In this case, these were 20 kilowatt chargers, I believe, which is perfect for a few hour trip to the mall to top you up. And there's also battery swap stations everywhere. I think you guys in general, whenever I mention battery swap to you, you go, "Wow, that seems dumb. It seems wasteful. It seems expensive." And look, on the surface of it, I agree. It doesn't seem like a smart idea until you experience it and you go, "Whoa, that works." And I did 20, 15 different battery swap operations, I don't know, throughout our trip. Every single one of them flawless. Every single one of them super easy, super nice. There was only one issue, I should say, that we ran into, but that was because we had an experimental sort of their 150 kilowatt hour pack in the car, and we were trying to downgrade, and it was just because we didn't have the app to the car. But that'll be in an out-of-spec motoring road trip video. We then went in the mall. We checked out the new ET9. I have a full tour coming on this vehicle. Absolutely insane. Maybach competitor, steer-by-wire, everything vertically integrated, designed by Neo. Really great hardware chipsets, really great software, amazing sort of Porsche Active Ride-esque suspension, which was really impressive. They say 10 times more responsive than Porsche's system. Just shows that, okay, Neo's really getting into the next generation of high quality engineering, which I think is the right time for the company. And at the same time, they're launching their cheaper sub brands, Firefly, which we didn't do anything with this trip, but also Envo, which has a direct Tesla Model Y competitor. I went to this factory. We'll have a tour coming as well. Also drove the car and made a video, and that will come. Really impressive. This is like $7,000 to $10,000 less than a Model Y. Has almost all the same features as the Model Y Refresh, power rear seat, ambient lighting. This actually has massaging heated and cooled seats. Drove really nice, plenty of power. That's an impressive one. I think you guys really should check out that video because in the US, there's really no good competitor to the Model Y. You can really take any of the assortment of electric SUVs that are on the market here, and go, yeah, the only reason you would buy that is because you either want the charging of eGMP in one category, or maybe a certain trim of another vehicle, or you hate Elon or something. I don't know. But if you just look at vehicles, which is what I do, like the Model Y ticks all the boxes, especially the new refresh one, except in China, there's competition. Not here in the US. So it's really, Tesla actually has some work to do over in China, which is interesting. We swung by a random Tesla showroom just to see what was going on. I tried to find a new Model Y. This was before we knew we could actually film the new Y. We always had an inkling, and I should say that video is actually already live on this channel, my full tour of the new Tesla Model Y. But that was the last video we shot there. And to be totally transparent, so many people in the video were like, oh, that's why you went to China. I'm like, I knew roughly the Model Y was launching around this time, and maybe we'd get an opportunity to check it out, but that was just pure luck. There was nothing beyond pure luck because the trip was already booked before any of the Model Y stuff happened. And, that was set. We couldn't change that. So we just got super lucky on that Model Y video, and also reaching out to Tesla Communications and them allowing us to come and film that car really worked out great. Yeah, we did a bunch of car spotting that day, the first day in China, and I'll breeze through the rest, but the first day was really an eye-opening experience. We got to see what people drive, and what they drive is new, high-tech, low-cost electric vehicles with fantastic software, great charging, amazing driver assistance, and that is the baseline expectation. And in the US, there's really only one or two cars that kind of fit, one or two brands that fit into that category. It really is Tesla because they have that driver assistance component, but then also Lucid and Rivian doing an amazing job with their software, but seriously lagging on the autonomous or driving assistant capabilities. Meanwhile, in China, you see cars like Avatars with their Huawei driver assistance system pretty commonly, and it was just impressive. I also want to preface this that our first day was in Shanghai, which is an expensive city to live in where people can afford new cars. And when we went out to the countryside, we did still see a higher mix than the US of EVs, but it definitely got more combustion car heavy out into the outskirts, into the rural areas of China, but still way more EVs than you would expect to see kind of anywhere. And just like a lot of fleet vehicles are electric, and EVs are just commonplace now, which I thought was really interesting. I mentioned the EM90. This is the Zeekr 009. So those are sister vehicles shared on that Zeekr SEA platform. And it's the SEA Extended. I forget exactly the name, but it's in some of the videos. Great charging performance, great stuff. Wish we got the EM90 here. I think it would do pretty well. Unfortunately, a lot of these Chinese cars, if they came here, would be subject to tariffs, but I'm not sure if they built them here, if they would be. Like, I know there's now extra capacity at some Volkswagen Group plants. I just saw a headline that Chinese automakers might start building in China or in Europe, and also maybe even in Mexico or the US. So I don't think, everyone's like, oh, we'll never see these cars. I actually think we will, just kind of the best selling ones eventually. I don't think there's a way you can stop them from coming to the US. They're really just that good. We played around with the Mega some more. Again, I'll do a full dedicated episode on that. Then we went to go charge it. We went and found these are the Li charging stations. Most of the Li charging stations that we found had their 2 or 4C chargers. Those are like 250 kilowatt chargers or maybe 400 kilowatt chargers. And then they have a couple 500 plus kilowatt chargers. Those are the 5Cs. And the only way to really know is when you look down at this little badge on the charger right there, and that shows 5C. We didn't have time. This was like middle of the night. I was super tired. It actually wasn't. It was only 8 p.m., but I was all messed up on time zones, and I was just like dying. And I was like, I really want to shoot this thing, but it has to go back. We have other stuff to do. So we didn't get a video in, but I can at least make a podcast for you. And we were doing 340 kilowatts at 70%. So you can only imagine how good it is earlier in the charging experience. So that was a really fun charging session. The highest power I had ever charged a vehicle. We did see over 400 kilowatts in that session. I have that somewhere on my phone, and it was just awesome. Yep, this is my first time activating a state grid charger. This is what those apps look like. So this is actually in WeChat, I believe. It's a sub app. And you guys should just, definitely play around with some of that stuff. It works pretty well. We then, the next morning, went to the racetrack. We played around with some Zeekr products, but the main reason we were there was we actually took this vehicle from the racetrack. We went to Ningbo, which is a city south of Shanghai. We went for a Lynk & Co. track day. This was ideally supposed to be a Zeekr 001 FR, but I guess for some reason we couldn't arrange those cars. I'm not sure. So I shot a video for my personal channel of Drew and I going sort of head-to-head, lap by lap, which was just a great time on track always in these Lynk & Co. 03 Plus combustion cars. I won't focus on them too much in this video. It was just more or less an experience to go on a Chinese fantastic track, and we just happened to use those cars. I would have loved to bring EVs, though. Then we took a drive after the track day, which, again, that video will be on the Kyle Connor channel, over to the Geely Group Development Center. Now, I've been lucky enough to visit a lot of development centers around the world, and this was the most hustle, the most bustle, the most excitement, the most amount of prototypes testing I've ever seen from any development center in the world. And it just shows this rapid innovation that the Chinese brands are bringing, and you felt it when you were there. They essentially have their own city for Geely Group development, and it's called Hangzhou Bay, which is different than Hangzhou City. And like everything here was just new cars, test mules, charging testing, all this crazy stuff. And I'm like, wow, I'm in heaven. This is so cool. And they really are, yes, building cars quickly, so the development cycles are compressed. But I think especially Geely Group compared to the others, they know what it takes to build a good driving car. And that's because they have some incredible partnerships from Mercedes with Smart, with Lotus, of course, one of the best driving brands in history. I'm not here to say the Lotus EVs represent the ethos of the company, but they have talent inside their group. There's some Aston Martin love. There's some other stuff going on in there as well, where they have traditional automaker or access to traditional automaker chassis tuners, drivetrain calibration guys, and total vehicle system operations guys, and they can inject that sort of legacy, crazy focus on driving dynamics into their insane development cycles for their new cars, and they're really doing a good job. And Geely is really like the Volkswagen of China. There's a bunch of sub-brands, a bunch of different stuff. For example, here we have a Zeekr 007-inch frame. We have a Zeekr, what the heck is this thing called again? Why am I blanking on this? Got to find it. Zeekr Mix, of course, which was my favorite car from the trip. This and the Lee were my two favorites, I would say. And it was just, they're taking this platform approach where they'll make a platform, build a bunch of different cars off a bunch of different brands for it, and then distribute them globally, very similar to Volkswagen's approach. And honestly, I think Geely's doing it better than Volkswagen Group in many respects. Not all, but in many respects. We have a full video coming on the Lynk & Co. 02, which will be sold in Europe, maybe one day in North America as well, not sure. And we went to, a great American restaurant, which was really funny. This was a pretty popular car that we saw around China, the Toyota BZ3. It's like the sedan version of the BZ4X, except it has a BYD blade battery and a BYD motor. So maybe better, but everyone says it's still shit, so maybe not so good. Yeah, this is an example of one of those parking garages that is blast proof. So all of these openings have giant blast doors around them. The cabinets have like gas masks and stuff. And it's almost like awkward being down in there. It's like almost a bit scary, but maybe it's just because I'm not used to like being in a bomb shelter most of the time. But that's where you park, so your car is going to be safe, which is amazing. So that's a Zeekr X. This is just a tour of our parking garage at a different hotel that we stayed in to show you what people are driving. Volvo, incredibly popular around there because, again, it's Geely City. I reviewed the Zeekr Mix, a full video coming on that. We then went to the Zeekr factory. This was one of the many, but this is the Zeekr SEA large factory. So this is 009, Polestar 4, 001, bunch of other vehicles are produced there, and it was a really cool experience to get to go and see a Polestar 4 getting born as an example. So it was great to go in that factory. We learned a ton, and yes, we shot a full tour video of that. The most impressive video of the trip comes now, which is the charging test of the Zeekr 7X. Actually, right before we left on this, I tested the new smart car Smart #5, which is an impressive car. We'll have a video coming, of course. But we did a charging test of the Zeekr 7X from 0 to 100%. And all I can tell you is insanity. This will break the internet when we post it for automakers all around the world. You can see here we're at 80% state of charge, still doing 245 kilowatts, 250 kilowatts at 80% on a 75 kilowatt hour battery pack. You can only imagine how fast this little tiny battery charged on the way up. And I, of course, recorded it, and this is going to be a prioritized video coming very soon because I think this has surpassed even Lee Mega's charging performance in terms of a C rate because it's a relatively small battery. But again, we saw almost 500 kilowatt charging on a 75 kilowatt hour pack, 10 to 80. And I have to double check on the data, but I believe it was under 10 minutes or right at 10 minutes. So we'll definitely see that. I then went on a road trip to Hefei. Alyssa and I took the ES6 battery swapping and road tripping to Neo's factory. So we went basically right from Zeekr factory to Neo factory, which was a beautiful drive. We shot a road trip video of that. I think on the way back, we shot a road trip video. F-150 Raptors are sold in China, by the way. We saw like 5 or 6 the trip. So they weren't incredibly uncommon. They're not totally common, but wasn't entirely rare. This was at the Neo factory. We saw Onvo, of course. We just spoke about that vehicle. It was incredible to see. This was our road trip home, sharing some sights along the way. There are lasers on the highway on China to stimulate your brain at night so you don't fall asleep, I guess. I'm not entirely convinced it works because I was still tired at times and I was like, oh, yeah, okay, lights aren't helping much. But I guess it does get your mind thinking. And it's just an interesting thing to drive down the highway and you just have these, you're at like a disco party and the lights are flashing and each one's a little bit different. Some have different colors, some have different flash patterns. And it was really, really interesting. We did a lot of talking about what it's like to drive in China, what it's like to road trip through China. And so we experienced and showed a lot of that. This was one of the most impressive videos that we shot, and I can't wait to share this one with you. This is what's called the Avatar brand. I believe this one's the 1.1, the Avatar 11. They also have a 12 and some other ones as well. It's a relatively new automaker, but they're using Huawei's top-level driver assistance system with 3 LiDARs. It's insane. I mean, the one thing is the perception of the sensors is up for debate, even in the Chinese market. Do you do LiDAR? Do you do camera? How do you fuse all the different types of information with multiple sensor types together? We talk a lot about that in that video. Regardless of the sensor type, what was impressive to me about this system was actually the tuning. It was the way that the car behaved, the way that it blended in with traffic and was fluid, because a lot of Chinese driving isn't so structured. It's like the opposite of Germany, and it is getting better from what I'm told. And it really wasn't scary at all to drive in China. It wasn't hard driving in China. You have to be a little bit aggressive. It's honestly like driving in New York City at times, but that's not uncommon. I grew up there, so I'm used to, squeezing our car through a little tight space and not letting people in and all that stuff. And it actually kind of works. Driving in China is very much like a me. I'm out to get me to the location the fastest. People aren't really expecting for you to let them in. And so when you do slow down and try and be nice to someone, it actually almost disturbs the traffic flow because people are like, what are you doing? That's so weird. Just go. And, I'll squeeze in when I can. And it actually really works to just stay on it and stay aggressive all the time. I really do enjoy driving there. I thought it was really fun, but it's really hard for a driver assistance system to drive like that. Except for this one, this Huawei driver assistance, a lot will argue, I firmly believe I've experienced most now, is the top ADAS in China. And Tesla FSD is not available in China yet. Can't wait to do a head-to-head when it is. But this was the most natural, the most competent, the most aggressive, and just so well-tuned video. And I think we have an hour and a half raw footage drive through urban areas with that. I think you'll enjoy it. We did spend a lot of time testing Xpeng vehicles, Xiaopeng vehicles, however you say it, and we drove both the P7 Plus seen in the back and the X9 later in our trip, so I'll share that. This is the Mona. I did want to make a video with the Mona. This is one of the least expensive EVs on sale in China. It's under 20 grand. It was originally designed to be like a car for Didi, which is like an Uber service there. Didis are everywhere, and a lot of people get around with Didi. And so I think this was a project that was originally developed for ride sharing. Xpeng took over the entire project, and now they have their Mona vehicle, which I thought was super impressive just from checking it out in the showroom, and will hope to drive it at some point in the future. We also saw another Tesla showroom. One thing that's interesting for the EV nerds on this channel, I think you'll enjoy this. Old school Model S's that were sold in China typically don't have a green plate. They have the old blue plate because they didn't qualify for new energy plates, or it wasn't a thing yet. This one may have been sold on the secondhand market because it's a first generation Model S with a green plate. But what's interesting is they were sold with NACS in China. They had I guess it wasn't J3400 at the time, but they had the US spec charge port. And you can see here, there needs to be an adapter to GBT, which is their charging plug, in order to use superchargers and AC charging. So there's two different adapters. There's an AC adapter and a DC adapter that they have to carry around, which I thought was interesting. I had no idea that was the case. More Neo charging stuff that we looked at. One thing that's a really cool trend, just to show you this here, there's a lot of cars, Xpeng and Neo and Li, no, not Neo, just Xpeng and Li, actually put a light on the outside of their vehicles when you're using their ADAS. It's a cyan colored light, and Mercedes is starting to do this as well with their official level 3 system. But I think it's a great thing to know, like when the vehicle is using its internal systems versus not. My brain instantly goes to like, oh, well, I know I can cut you off and be totally fine. But also, I feel like there's a social aspect to it where, in general, I'm not sure if it's good or bad, but it's at least interesting. I could see argument points either way, and maybe it's something you can turn off in the software. But that was really a cool thing to see, like other Li drivers and Xpeng drivers driving with the blue light on the outside of their vehicle to know you're using their FSD-like systems. Then we went on an absolutely epic road trip, 1,200 kilometers, took 18-hour drive from Shanghai to Beijing. We took two Neos on the trip, an ET7, which is an incredibly comfortable sort of 5 Series or E-Class competitor on a trip. We had the executive package with smoother suspension, screens in the back. That car was awesome. We really fell in love with this one, and we're like, oh, damn, because we were a little bit disappointed by the Neo ES6 in all transparency. That car just didn't drive great, didn't have good pedal mapping, didn't have good suspension, and we're incredibly grateful to Neo for letting us use it. And the intention was not to film a review. They were just like, here, use the car. And we did make a bunch of content with it, of course. But when we got into the ET7, we were like, oh, we've made it. This is nice. And that's not even the brand new ET9 with all the crazy stuff. So I think a really bright future ahead for Neo. Some of our friends from Neo actually took an ET5 touring. We had so much luggage, we couldn't fit it. And they had a reason to bring both cars up. And we're like, oh, we'll just drive together. And it actually worked out really well because we did get into a sticky situation at a police stop on the way into Beijing, and we needed them to like help explain what the hell was going on because we had 3 Americans in a Neo ET7 going to Beijing, driving through the night. They were like, what is happening here? They stopped us at a toll booth, pulled us out of the car. Thankfully, we had our friends from Neo. They came, they explained, and we were good to go. But it was pretty tense. That was interesting. Other than that, we really had no run-ins with police or government officials or anything like that. There are cameras everywhere. You do feel watched, but it's not like the impression I had was like they're not watching me. It's just if something goes wrong, then there's a video feed of an accident or whatever that happened. But there are speed cameras everywhere. So this was the ET7 that we drove up. It was a really, really nice car to cruise up on our road trip. We'll have a full out-of-spec motoring video going. We went to a local restaurant, which was one of the best experiences of my life. We were in this little tiny town. They've never seen Americans step foot in this restaurant, and we just had a great time with the people, with the food. It was so friendly, and yeah, one of those sort of, that's why we road trip moments. And that's what we did this all for. It was really cool. We did get stuck at a charger at 2% with no way to activate it. And thankfully, through calling a bunch of local contacts in China, friends of ours, we got a QR code to our friend Catherine, who got it started for us. But that was some tense moments as well, where we thought we would be able to activate it, but we needed a local number in order to do so. Yeah, so that was really one of the highlights of the trip, of course, was the drive to Beijing. We went through Beijing. We went to the zoo once we were there, which was really cool. And I also got to check out Neo ET9. We shot a full tour. Actually, we didn't shoot a full tour in Beijing. That was the original intention. There was a couple issues with the car. The suspension was broken. They ended up resetting it and getting it good to go, but we were then late for our train and we took the high-speed train back. But a life goal of mine was to check out a Hongqi, a Red Flag. Now, Red Flag Hongqi has a bunch of different vehicles all around, from low level to medium to high end. But I really wanted to check out their Golden Sunflower brand. So this is the L5. This is like what the Xi Jinping drives around in type thing, just like the scariest vehicle on wheels. And we went to the showroom and they were so nice. They let us start them up and sit inside. And wow, that was just a cool experience. These are $1 million plus vehicles. And they are actually, I think you have to be vetted and approved by the Chinese government to buy one. That's what one of our commenters said on one of our short form videos. I don't know if it's true or not, but I thought it was funny. Then we took the high-speed train back down, and it only took 4 hours. So 18 hours to drive up. Yes, we did sightseeing, we did lots of video, and we really dilly-dallied. If you're really pushing, you could probably do it in 12 to 14 hours in an electric car. But then it was only 4 hours back on the smoothest. Now, I've never really been on a... I've been on a high-speed train in Europe, but never really in Europe or in Asia. And this was just dead smooth, dead fast, pretty cheap, incredible experience. And I love it. Now, for me, I'm a weirdo. I would drive every time. Like if you give me the choice, high-speed train or car, I'm like, I want to keep my stuff with me, my friends with me. I want to go have the autonomy to be on my own schedule. I don't want to be locked into you have to be at the train station at this time. I just get so annoyed with public transit that way, but that's a very personal thing. For like 99% of use cases, this high-speed train stuff is amazing. And China's investing heavily in maglev and some other things. So I thought it was cool at least to experience it. I'm glad we did it. Check it off the bucket list. Just sat at over 200 miles an hour down the whole way, which was really, really great. Then we got back and we really are getting to our final days in China here. We filmed Xpeng G9, which was X9, which is an incredibly luxurious van. I really wanted to focus on the van stuff while we were there. So we did Li Mega, Zeekr Mix, and Xpeng X9. We also looked at EM90 and Zeekr 009, but didn't make full reviews of those. They just made it into other videos. We stayed at a super weird hotel that had statues like this everywhere, which was hilarious. And, after we did the X9, we swapped it for the P7 Plus, which is right here. And we were going to make a video, and I did make a driver assistance video with this because this is using Xpeng's camera-only system, which is really pretty impressive, actually, but still needs some tuning. And then we filmed Model Y, and that was kind of it. Then we took a Uber. We returned all the cars. We took a Didi from our hotel to the airport, which was an electric van again, just randomly. We didn't request an electric van, but it just turned out to be the Roway IMAX 8 EV. It's very similar to like the MG brand, just branded as Row in China. And it was a really, just kind of basic van that was electric. Pretty nice. And that kind of rounds out the China trip. Then we went to the UAE, had a bunch of fun, Mercedes EQE, Porsche Taycan road trip around, did the Model Y stuff. Took a Taycan around UAE, separate topic, separate video, and that will come on the Out of Spec Motoring channel and my personal channel. So that's our China trip. It was eye-opening. I mean, that's kind of what we did, but in general, you're going to see mall tours of different showrooms. You're going to see driver assistance tests. You're going to see just a whole nother world that honestly we're not used to in the North American market and to a large extent in Europe. Tesla is clearly leading the electric vehicle revolution from the entire vehicle integration. There are certain companies that are doing powertrain and efficiency better. There are certain companies that are doing charging better. There are certain companies that are building a lifestyle brand better, like Rivian and others. And I really do think that Rivian, Lucid, and Tesla are representative of the future car vibe. But in China, there's just so much more. And I think we have a lot to learn from their vehicle types. And, so many people have asked me, friends of mine, they're like, oh, how far behind are we? Or are we cooked? Are we, is the American car market dead, or what's going to happen? I'm like, no, I really don't think so. I don't actually think like if the companies wanted to here, we have insane engineering resources in America. We could apply the China method of building vehicles, maybe extend the timeline a little bit, maybe put a little bit more emphasis on driving dynamics, pedal tuning, stuff like that. And we could really compete here if we wanted to. Put in great chipsets, great software. The literally the playbook to make a great electric car is there. It's not hard. And what's been so surprising to me is that's been there for a long time. I mean, everything in China is like taking a lot of inspiration from early Model S and Model X and Model 3 and putting their own spin on it in a sense. And so it's like the formula's been there, but even the copycats or those that followed in the Western world can't even match like what a new Model 3 does. And in China, they can. And so it's just, I think, regardless of anything, it is just giving a shit. Like if car companies cared to build a fantastic vertically integrated software stack, they would invest the money on an architecture, they'd build for the future, and they would produce some amazing cars today or in the very near future. And I hope we see more of that, because if we don't, then even at 100% import tariffs, these Chinese cars make a lot of sense. And I don't think there's any stopping it. That's just my view, but maybe you guys will feel differently. I think we're going to have Chinese cars in the US, maybe not built in China, maybe built in other factories around the world, but their cars, their engineering will show up here probably sooner than we think. And so it's all this trip really was, it was super eye-opening that like auto companies in the West have to get their shit together. They need to go as fast as possible. Every executive needs to go to China and spend a week and drive everything. It's so easy to do it. You just go to a mall, just land at the airport in Shanghai, go to the local mall, walk through it, go and can I drive this? Can I drive that? You got to get your driving permit. That was really easy, actually. And then you're good to go and you just learn so much. So I hope that's happening. I hope we see a shift. No question, China speed is real. The products are great. Not every single product. I mean, we drove some really terrible cars too. You'll see that. But we drove some really cool stuff there. And if anything, it's just a giant wake-up call to the rest of the auto industry. And I hope these videos serve as it as well. We went in with an open mind. I know some of our viewers don't have an open mind. We tested, we drove, we had zero control over our content. We didn't allow any company to control our content. If they mentioned anything like, oh, well, you have to have us review the video first, we're like, nope, not possible. And honestly, they all agreed. They were all pretty cool. They're like, yeah, do your thing and then just post when you're done. And that's what we did. And I hope you guys enjoy the videos. I hope you get a sense of the authenticity of our content, what we were trying to do here. And I think you'll enjoy it. So bunch of videos coming, maybe not every day, but depending on video performance, I might leave an extra day for it to do really well, or we'll just stack them up. But time to get to the editing booth. And we'll see you very soon. Thanks so much for watching another Out of Spec Reviews video. That was my experience in China, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.